Daniel Reyes was always running from grief, from time, from the kind of silence that made a man remember too much. On this particular afternoon, he was running through school hallways, still in his janitor uniform, trying not to be late to pick up his 10-year-old son, Leo. The boy was waiting on the bench outside the school library, legs swinging, face lit up with excitement that seemed untouched by the world's weight. "Dad, guess what?" Leo blurted out before Daniel could catch his breath. "I met someone today. She helped me fix the servo motor on my robot arm." Daniel blinked. "Someone?" "Yeah, her name's Alyssa. She's so smart and funny, and she didn't even laugh when I said I wanted to build a solar-powered trash robot." Leo's eyes sparkled. "I told her she should come over for dinner." Daniel's smile faltered. His first instinct was to say no. Not because he was worried about safety. Leo was a good judge of character, but because the idea of someone else sitting at their dinner table made his chest tighten. That table still held echoes. His late wife's laughter, her lasagna recipe taped under the drawer, her chair no one touched. It had been 5 years, but some wounds didn't clock time. He ran a hand through his hair. "You invited her for dinner?" "Yeah, she said she'd think about it." "Please, Dad, just one time." Daniel hesitated. He had worked hard to build a small world for Leo, a safe, steady one. Letting someone in, even for an hour, felt like risking all of it. But then he looked at Leo's face, wide open, hopeful. He sighed. "All right, but it's just dinner, and you're helping me cook." Leo grinned. "Deal." As they walked home, Daniel found himself wondering, who was this Alyssa? A teacher? A student's parent? A neighbor? He didn't know that the woman Leo had invited was far from ordinary, and that her arrival would stir a part of his life he thought was long buried. Across town, in a sleek glass building, Alyssa Hart stepped out of a boardroom filled with executives still whispering after her exit. She removed her heels, kicked them under her desk, and stayed out the window. Everyone thought she was on top of the world, the youngest female CEO in California's clean energy sector. But they didn't know she hadn't slept through the night in months, that she'd stepped down temporarily, citing personal burnout, and had started volunteering at the community library just to feel human again. She thought of the bright-eyed kid with the crooked glasses and messy robot parts, and his quiet question, "Want to come over for dinner with me and my dad?" She'd smiled. "Let me think about it." Now, for the first time in weeks, she was actually considering it. Dinner with strangers sounded crazy, but maybe crazy was exactly what she needed. Neither of them knew yet. The invitation wasn't to a meal. It was the start of something neither of them dared to wish for. Daniel tried to forget about the dinner invitation. He told himself it was probably a one-time interaction, a random woman passing through Leo's day. But Leo didn't let it go. Every morning over breakfast and every evening after homework, he brought her up. "Alyssa this, Alyssa that." It wasn't just admiration. It was connection. "She's really smart, Dad." "Not weird smart. Cool smart," Leo insisted one evening, gripping a fork mid-bite. "She knows how to fix wires without breaking stuff. And she knows all the Iron Man references." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "That's your bar for smart. Knowing Marvel." Leo shrugged. "It's a good start." Daniel chuckled despite himself. The boy was relentless. But beneath the teasing and charm, Daniel could tell this mattered to him. Maybe because he hadn't seen Leo click with anyone new in a long time, not since his mother. Maybe because Daniel hadn't allowed anyone close enough to try. So he gave in. "Fine," he said at last. "One dinner. Nothing fancy. Just spaghetti and garlic bread. And you're doing the dishes." Leo pumped a fist in the air like he just won a championship. "Deal." That same night, across the city, Alyssa Hart sat behind her minimalist desk, half listening to an executive drone on about energy projections. Her fingers tapped idly on a notebook, the word Leo scribbled in the margin. That boy had lit up the library like a human light bulb, so full of questions, ideas, and enthusiasm that it had melted the frost from her usual armor. She had gone to the library hoping to escape the burnout, hoping that the silence of books and the honesty of children would be enough to quiet the chaos inside her. And for once, It had worked. Leo had reminded her what it felt like to be seen. Not as a boss, not as a brand, but as a person. She wasn't sure she was ready for a dinner with strangers, especially ones who didn't know who she really was. But a part of her was drawn to the simplicity of it all. No suits, no press releases, no Ms. Hart, may I? Just a father and son, in a modest home, offering her a plate and a place at their table. Later that week, she walked into the library, and Leo was already waiting with a grin. "So?" he asked. She crouched beside him, brushed her hair behind one ear, and smiled. "Tell your dad I'll be there, but he better make the garlic bread crispy." Leo whooped loud enough to make the librarian glance over. For the first time in months, Alyssa felt something spark inside her. Not a fire from ambition or adrenaline. Something gentler, warmer. Back in their small apartment, Daniel stared at the spare chair at their kitchen table. He dusted it off without thinking. Then he paused, surprised at himself. He hadn't planned on opening his home to anyone. But somehow, a 10-year-old and a quiet stranger had opened something deeper, a small crack in the wall he had built around his heart. And dinner hadn't even started yet. The scent of garlic and tomato sauce filled the small kitchen, bubbling gently on the stovetop. Daniel stirred the pot of spaghetti with focused precision, his brow furrowed as if he were building something far more complicated than dinner. He had changed his shirt twice, and Leo had already noticed. "Dad, it's just food," Leo said, bouncing from one foot to the other as he placed the mismatched plates on the table. "Yeah, well, it's our food," Daniel muttered. "Doesn't hurt to try." The doorbell rang. Leo sprinted toward it, nearly tripping over his own feet. Daniel wiped his hands on a towel, suddenly hyper-aware of every imperfection in the house. The scratch on the wall, the slightly uneven legs of the dining table, the worn-out cushion on the armchair. When Alyssa stepped in, the room changed. She wore jeans and a soft cream sweater, her hair loosely tied back. No jewelry, no trace of boardrooms or billion-dollar meetings. She smiled warmly as Leo introduced her like a proud host. "This is my dad. He makes the best spaghetti. You're gonna love it." Daniel extended a hand, and she shook it firmly. Her touch was confident, but not overbearing. He had expected, he wasn't sure what, but not someone so grounded. Dinner started awkwardly. Daniel fumbled with the salad bowl and offered water 3 times. But Alyssa had a way of softening silences. She asked questions, not just polite ones, but curious ones. She wanted to know what Leo liked about robotics, which books made him laugh, why he thought trash should be turned into energy. And she listened, really listened. Daniel watched as Leo lit up, rambling about circuits and coding, using words Daniel barely followed. Alyssa nodded, adding thoughtful suggestions and the occasional "that's brilliant." Daniel couldn't remember the last time someone paid that kind of attention to his son, or treated him like his thoughts mattered. So, Daniel finally said, "What do you do when you're not hanging around libraries helping kids with robots?" Alyssa smiled. "Consulting. Tech-related. Nothing exciting." He nodded slowly, buying the answer. He didn't push, but something about the way she dodged the spotlight piqued his curiosity. Still, he liked that she didn't seem to need to impress anyone. After dinner, Leo dragged her to his little desk in the corner, where his science project, a half-built, half-functioning trash bot, waited for feedback. Alyssa crouched beside him, pointing out wiring tricks, offering gentle suggestions. Her voice was low, precise, and patient. Daniel leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching the two of them laugh over burnt resistors and crooked sensors. It was the kind of laughter the house hadn't heard in years. When Alyssa finally stood to leave, she turned to Daniel with a smile that felt real, without any polite layers of forced gratitude. "Leo's a remarkable kid. You've done a great job." Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out at first. He only managed a nod, surprised at how much those words meant. He hadn't expected to care what this woman thought. But somehow, it mattered. She left with a quiet thank you, and Leo waved at her until the door closed. Daniel stood still for a moment, staring at the chair she had occupied. There was a warmth in the room that hadn't been there before. He wasn't sure what just happened, But for the first time in a long while, he wasn't dreading what came next. It started subtly. Daniel found himself checking the clock more often in the afternoons, wondering if Alyssa might drop by after her library shift. He told himself it was just for Leo, because she was good for him, because she encouraged him in a way few others did. But the truth settled in quietly. He liked seeing her. He liked the ease she brought into their home, the way she asked about his day without judgment, the way she fit into the quiet spaces without forcing conversation. She came by once with a stack of library books, including a rare robotics manual Leo had mentioned in passing. Another day, she brought muffins. They were on sale, she said, but Daniel caught the homemade label on the box. She stayed a little longer each time, helping Leo connect wires or testing out programming bugs. One evening, as Daniel swept the front steps, Mrs. Grier, his elderly neighbor with sharp eyes and a memory like a hawk, waddled over with her cane. "She's been here a lot lately," she said, nodding toward the house. Daniel tried not to sound defensive. "Leo likes her. She helps him with his projects." Mrs. Grier squinted. "I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying women like her don't show up without a story. That woman's not just kind. She's something else." That stuck in his head longer than it should have. That night, after Leo went to bed, Daniel sat at his laptop and opened a search tab. He typed, "Alyssa, robotics, tech consultant, San Francisco." Then, "Alyssa, library volunteer." Nothing came up. He frowned. No social media. No business pages. Not even a casual LinkedIn. She was either deeply private or hiding something. And yet, every memory of her felt genuine. The way she bent down to talk to Leo at eye level. The way her eyes lit up when Leo explained his ridiculous ideas. The quiet way she rinsed her cup after dinner, without being asked. Still, Daniel couldn't ignore the voice in his head. The one that whispered about people who leave. About those who vanish when things get hard. He had trusted once, given his whole heart to someone, and then life had pulled the rug out from under him. Since then, he'd built walls not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. And now here she was, easing her way through cracks he hadn't even known were still open. He sat on the couch in silence, Leo's laughter echoing faintly from his bedroom. In his chest, something stirred, warm, hesitant, and dangerous. He told himself to be careful. He told himself not to feel too much. But hearts never really listen. The school gym buzzed with energy, tables stacked with science displays, colorful poster boards, paper-make volcanoes, and rows of awkwardly proud kids standing by their inventions. It was the annual fundraiser and science fair, and Leo had insisted that Alyssa come. "She helped me finish the trash butt," he said. "She has to be there." Daniel didn't argue. He just watched the door more than he needed to. When Alyssa arrived, dressed simply in a denim jacket and black slacks, she didn't stand out. She moved through the crowd like any other parent or volunteer, holding a cup of punch and smiling at the kids' presentations. But there was a poise about her, an ease that came from years of being listened to, even if she didn't demand it. Leo ran up, pulled her to his booth, and showed her the final version of his solar-powered trash collector. She applauded, genuinely impressed. What no one saw, until later, was what Alyssa had done quietly that morning. She'd called the school's principal and made a private donation under the name Heart Green Foundation, ensuring the robotics club would have funding for the next 3 years. No fuss, no headlines, just a quiet gesture of belief in kids like Leo. Halfway through the event, the principal tapped the MIC and called for attention. "I'd like to thank an anonymous donor for their incredibly generous contribution to our STEM programs. This gift will allow our students to continue innovating, dreaming, and learning. Whoever you are, you've made a difference." A ripple of polite applause followed. Alyssa smiled faintly and said nothing. But someone else had seen her. A man in a blazer leaned toward another parent and whispered, loud enough for a few ears to catch. "Wait, isn't that Alyssa Hart, the CEO of Hart Green Tech? She's on Forbes' top 40 under 40. Within minutes, the room shifted. Teachers looked twice. Parents murmured. One student pointed. The illusion cracked. Daniel stood frozen as he processed it. A CEO? That Alyssa Hart? The woman who'd sat at his table like a regular neighbor, who wore hoodies to the library and brought over banana bread. His mind raced. He pulled Leo aside. Did you know she's a millionaire? A CEO? Leo blinked. No, not really. I just thought she liked books. And robots. Daniel knelt, his voice low. She runs a billion-dollar company. Leo. That's not just books and robots. Leo shrugged. She never acted like one. She acted like someone who listened. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. When the event ended, Alyssa approached slowly, sensing the shift in his posture, the stiffness, the distance. She opened her mouth to explain. I was going to tell you, she said softly, but I liked who I was when I was with you, and I didn't want that to change. Daniel looked at her, eyes hard. So you lied. She flinched. I never lied. I just left that part out. He didn't respond. The silence between them said more than any words could. Alyssa held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded to herself. Take care of Leo, she whispered. He's one of the few people in this world who sees people for who they really are. Then she turned and walked away, weaving through the crowd now parting to let her pass. Not as a guest, but as a headline. Daniel watched her go, unsure if he had just lost something or protected himself from something too good to be true. The days after the fundraiser passed like a slow, gray fog in the Reyes house. Leo barely touched his cereal in the mornings. He didn't want to work on his trash bot anymore. When Daniel asked if he wanted to visit the library, Leo shook his head without looking up from his plate. She probably doesn't want to see us, he mumbled. Daniel's chest tightened at that. He wanted to say something reassuring, but he wasn't sure he believed it himself. He hadn't answered Alyssa's text, hadn't returned her call, and yet the memory of her lingered, her laugh in the kitchen, the way she'd looked at Leo like he was brilliant, her calm voice explaining gears and coding loops like they were poetry. 3 days later, Daniel found himself outside a quiet cafe, fingers drumming nervously on a weathered table. Alyssa had agreed to meet. No expectations, no grand confrontation. Just a conversation. Just honesty. When she arrived, she wore no armor. No business suit. No confidence mask. Just jeans, sneakers, and tired eyes. Thanks for coming, she said softly, taking the seat across from him. Daniel nodded. Leo misses you. I miss him too. A moment passed. Then she took a breath, steadying herself. I didn't mean to deceive you, she said. I just needed one part of my life where I didn't have to be her, the CEO, the strategist, the symbol. I wanted to be someone who could kneel next to a kid and build something messy and beautiful without anyone expecting a press release. He looked at her, really looked, and saw something beneath the surface. Exhaustion, vulnerability, and a hint of hope. I wasn't hiding out of shame, she continued. I was hiding to breathe. Daniel lowered his gaze. You could have told me. I could have, she admitted. But would you have let me in if I had? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stirred his coffee and said, I panicked. Not because of who you were, but because of what you made me feel. Her brows furrowed slightly. What do you mean? I've kept people out since my wife passed. Not because I don't want love again, but because I'm terrified I'll lose it. I've built a life around predictability. You shook that, and it scared the hell out of me. Alyssa nodded slowly. I get it. I've done the same. Different reasons, but same walls. He looked up at her. I don't know if I can open the door fully yet. I don't know if I should. She smiled gently. Maybe you don't need to open it all the way. Maybe just leave it unlocked. A crack, enough to let the light in. That made him smile, just a little. They sat in silence for a while, two people not trying to fix the past, but just daring to exist in the present. As they stood to leave, Alyssa reached into her bag and handed him a folded blueprint. Leo's trashbot design. Perfected, optimized, annotated in her handwriting. Tell him I never stopped believing in his idea, she said. Daniel took it carefully. I'll tell him. You might be around to tell him yourself. Alyssa looked at him, not with expectation, but quiet understanding. And for the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel like running. The house was quiet that evening, the kind of stillness that usually made Daniel restless. But tonight, it felt different, expectant, almost gentle. He sat at the edge of his bed with an old showbox in his lap. Inside, nestled among faded birthday cards and little hand-drawn pictures, was a photo of his wife. She was laughing, wind in her hair, holding a baby-faced Leo on her hip. The picture had creases from being held too many times. Daniel stared at it for a long moment before speaking aloud, voice low and sincere. "I think I met someone," he said. "Not someone like you. No one could be. But she makes me want to try again. To be better, not just for Leo, but for me too." He placed the photo back carefully and closed the lid. The next morning, he picked up his phone and called Alyssa. No texts, no hesitation. "Dinner, tomorrow night. If you're free," he said simply. Her pause was brief, but warm. "I'll be there." For the first time in years, Daniel didn't just plan a meal, he planned a moment. He and Leo went to the grocery store together, arguing over herbs and which tomatoes were more spaghetti-worthy. Back home, they chopped, stirred, and laughed through flour-dusted chaos. The sauce wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Leo insisted on setting the table with his fancy mismatched plates. Daniel even found the candle box he hadn't touched in 5 years and lit one at the center. When the doorbell rang, Leo ran to open it. Alyssa stood there, holding a small wrapped box and a curious smile. "I brought a peace offering," she said. "A robotics kit. Not too fancy, but it has solar sensors and Bluetooth control." Leo's eyes widened. "This is so cool. You're officially forgiven." Alyssa laughed and stepped inside. The dinner was quieter than the last, less nervous, more real. They talked about everything and nothing. Alyssa shared stories from her startup days, and Daniel told her about how he used to build wooden playhouses before becoming a janitor. There was no tension now, only mutual respect woven with something softer. After Leo went to bed, kit in hand, already dreaming of inventions, Daniel walked Alyssa to the door. He looked at her, thoughtful. "I don't know your world," he said, voice steady, "and I probably never will. But you're welcome in mine, if you want to be." Alyssa's eyes softened, a flicker of something hopeful passing through them. "I do," she said. They stood there in the warm silence of understanding. No grand gestures, no declarations, just two people, finally willing to meet in the middle. Time, once heavy and dragging, began to move differently in the Reyes household. It didn't rush or race. It unfolded, gentle and steady, like a new rhythm finding its beat. Alyssa became a quiet fixture in their lives. Not daily, not overwhelming, but present in the best ways. She'd drop off tools Leo might need for his robot, or pass by on Saturdays to help him solder parts without burning the kitchen table. She never made herself the center, but somehow her presence always filled the room. At school, she offered to help with the science club, but insisted it remain anonymous. The students never knew the kind woman guiding their ideas had her name on half the green energy products in their textbooks. She wanted it that way, for them to learn without pressure, for Leo to succeed on his own terms. Daniel, at first, had watched from the sidelines. He remained cautious, protective, but he couldn't ignore how effortlessly she fit into their lives. How she listened, without ever trying to change them. She asked questions, but never pushed. She offered help, but never demanded space. Then one day, she invited him to her company. Daniel hesitated. That world wasn't his. He wore flannel and worked with wood, not algorithms and venture capital. But he went. Hot green tech was sleek, buzzing with quiet ambition and purpose. People greeted Alyssa with a respect that was almost reverent. He watched her lead a meeting with calm precision, solve a logistics issue in under 5 minutes, and still remember the name of the janitor's daughter. He stood in the back of the room, arms crossed, and for the first time, he didn't feel intimidated. He felt proud. On the ride home, she reached over and gently took his hand. No words, just a gesture. Not long after, she handed him a thick manila envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Your certification program," she replied. "I did some digging. You've got the skills. You just need the paperwork to go back to contracting." If you want it. Daniel stayed at her. Touched. Why? Because people like you shouldn't be cleaning up after others. You build things. And it's time you built something for yourself again. So he did. He studied, trained, and took the tests. Within months, he was back in the game, designing porches, renovating kitchens, and even working part-time on a local eco-housing project, thanks to a subtle referral from Alyssa. Their lives began to intertwine, not in a whirlwind, but like rivers joining at the right bend. Their worlds didn't clash. They complemented. Her sharp, future-driven mind balanced by his grounded, hands-on strength. Her business acumen matched by his quiet resilience. Leo, in the middle of it all, thrived. He had a father who believed in second chances, and a mentor who never treated his dreams like a child's fantasy. Together, they weren't just rebuilding their lives. They were building something none of them had dared to imagine. A home, a partnership, and maybe a future. The scent of grilled corn and smoky ribs filled the air as laughter echoed through the backyard. It was a bright Sunday afternoon, one of those days that felt like a reward for weathering long winters, literal and emotional. Daniel stewed at the grill, apron on, tongs in hand, flipping burgers like a pro. His flannel sleeves were rolled up, and for once, there was no trace of tension in his shoulders. The backyard, once quiet and underused, was now full of life. Folding chairs circled a small fire pit. A couple of Leo's classmates ran through a sprinkler on the far side of the yard, shrieking with joy. Mrs. Gryan nursed lemonade in a shaded corner while chatting with the school librarian. Neighbors mingled easily, plates full, hearts light. And in the center of it all was Alyssa, wearing jeans and a sundress, hair in a loose braid, laughing with one of the parents about the woes of school project deadlines. Someone approached her with a curious smile. "So, it's true? You really run that billion-dollar green tech company?" She smiled without missing a beat. "Yes, but today, I'm just here for the ribs." The woman chuckled, clearly charmed, and moved on. Daniel caught the exchange from the grill and shook his head with a grin. He turned off the heat, wiped his hands, and stepped into the middle of the yard, clinking a plastic cup with a spoon. "Hey, everyone, quick moment," he called out. The group quieted, all eyes on him. He looked a little shy, then glanced at Alyssa, who raised an eyebrow playfully. Daniel cleared his throat. "You know, I've spent most of my life trying to keep things steady. Safe. Predictable. I didn't expect much to change. But sometimes, someone walks into your life quietly, without warning, and ends up changing everything." He looked at Alyssa. "To the unexpected ones," he said, lifting his cup, "and to the ones who remind us it's okay to start again." Everyone raised their glasses. Leo darted between them, grabbing both Daniel and Alyssa by the hands. "I told you she was cool," he said, eyes bright. Alyssa laughed. "You really did." She knelt and hugged him, then stood and looked at Daniel. No words were needed. The softness in their eyes said everything. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of gold and orange, music played from a Bluetooth speaker, and people settled into stories and second servings. And in that backyard, in between the sound of sizzling ribs, children's laughter, and clinking cups, was a new kind of quiet. Not the kind built from fear or solitude, but the kind that comes when hearts finally find where they belong. Golden morning light spilled through the kitchen window, casting long, gentle streaks across the countertops. The room smelled of cinnamon and sizzling batter. Daniel stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with practiced ease, wearing an old t-shirt and the softest look he'd worn in years. Behind him, Alyssa leaned against the doorway, wrapped in a robe, a steaming mug of tea in her hands. Her hair was loosely tousled, her eyes calm. She said nothing, just watched, her presence as natural now as the kettle's quiet whistle or the creak of the old floorboards. Footsteps thundered down the hall. Leo burst into the kitchen, still in his pajamas, cradling a robotics kit almost as big as he was. "Dad, can we work on the infrared sensors after breakfast? I think I've figured out the bug." Daniel laughed. "One project at a time, engineer. Eat first, fix later." Leo set the kit down and hopped onto a chair, already drowning his pancakes in syrup. Alyssa smiled at the sight, taking a slow sip from her cup. For a moment, there was nothing, just the peaceful hum of a house that had once known too much silence. Daniel turned, spatula in hand, and looked at Alyssa. "I used to think my life ended the day she died," he said quietly. "But maybe it just paused until I could feel it again." She didn't speak. She didn't have to. She reached out and took his hand, warm and steady. And in that quiet kitchen, with pancakes browning and a child dreaming of machines, everything finally felt complete. Voiceover or narration. He thought she was just another guest at the table, but she brought back the seat he never knew was empty.